Did you deal with a Christian narcissist or a Christian abuser or someone that used religion to be able to mask the abusive natures that they did to you on a day-to-day basis? Have you ever encountered someone who appears deeply devout on the surface, but seems to use religious beliefs, their thoughts, different aspects to manipulate and control you or the people around them? Narcissists are demons. Have you ever encountered someone who appears to be deeply religious but exhibits narcissistic traits? Maybe you're curious about the concept of a Christian narcissist and how it affects those around them. Now, when I'm going to refer to inside this video, whenever I talk to a Christian narcissist, I'm going to talk to someone who is showing up in a religious or a Christian way, like in words or deeds or how they're actually being portrayed. And then when I use the word narcissist in this context, we're talking about the abuser. We're talking about someone who is abusing, belittling, putting down, hurting, controlling, manipulating, all those different pieces. Because there's a little bit of a piece here that I want to clarify inside this video before we get started. Being a Christian and then also being a narcissist, what does this look like different in my life? How does it show up different now? Because I used to keep this facade of I'm this perfect person. I'm this great person. I look good. I'm religious. I'm connected to God. All these different things is what I would portray. What was happening underneath the surface, what was happening in the relationship was just abuse. Being a person who was abusive, manipulative, controlling, all these type of things. And so there really was this big incongruence between what I was saying and what I was doing, how I was showing up and how I was portraying to other people. And so I want to clarify some of this and also explain that like this is the frame that I'm coming from. Is I grew up in religion. I grew up as a Christian. I grew up in all these different cultures that was very focused in Christianity, but also a lot of cultures that also brought in these toxic traits as normal. And so we're going to dive into that. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness about narcissistic abuse. I'm the founder of Raw Motivations, the creator of the Narc app, and your guide in the 45-day Clarity Challenge that you can access at claritychallenge.net. And go there today to start looking at and seeing different people that have gone through the challenge. There's multiple testimonials, multiple videos there that people have sent in saying, please tell other people how it's transformed our lives, how it's actually helped. Once you be able to understand that, so go to claritychallenge.net. When we talk through this aspect of understanding a Christian narcissist, like a Christian narcissist, just to define, is typically an individual who claims to follow the principles of Christianity. That claims to follow these principles to have them be nice, to have them be loving, to have them be caring, yet at the same time displays abusive tendencies and behaviors. Like they might use religious beliefs and practices to mask otherwise manipulation, to mask how they're trying to control, to mask how they're trying to exploit other people. This becomes a very, very manipulative and toxic blend of spirituality and narcissism that creates this confusing, this harmful dynamic for people that encounter them. Like when you're in a relationship with a Christian abuser, with a Christian narcissist, you're with someone who actively participates in those things that makes them look good. So like you might have a spouse where he actively participates in church activities, presents himself as a devout Christian, but behind the scenes, he's completely different. Maybe you grew up in this type of a household. You grew up in this type of household where the household was very abusive behind closed doors. But to the public, great Christian family. Look great. Another version of the mask that has been built with society and how Christianity and families have been transitioned and shown differently over the past couple of years. Behind the scenes, this is the part where a lot of Christianity and religion falls apart because a lot of it in practicality ends up being fake in that person's life. Like a lot of Christians would not get on to social media like this and say, hey, this is who I am. My name is Ben Taylor. I'm a narcissist. I've cheated on my wife 5 times. I'm here to be able to tell you about narcissistic abuse, how to break free, and what actually is going on, and all the shit that's underneath. You don't really find that. Because when you bring the truth into a lot of Christian circles, people run from it. Because what's actually behind the scenes is not Christianity. It's abuse and it's manipulation. Did you have this in your relationship? If so, leave a comment down below so other people know they're not alone. Did you have where the person in your life where he would present himself looking great? He might have been a deacon in the church. He might have been showing up in service in a certain way in the church, in the place that you go to worship, all these different things to look good. But behind the scenes, he's emotionally abusive. He's consistently belittling you. He's putting you down. He's gaslighting you. He's controlling you, using faith as a means to justify his actions. Using religion, religious texts to say, oh, this is why you need to obey me. We see this where narcissists will exploit religious authority, using it to control you, using it to get control over you, over other people, over, let's say, from a church perspective, over other followers of the congregation, using this to have and to maintain power and control. You might see it in the relationship where he's presented himself as being the spiritual leader. Like he's got the best insight, he's got the best prayers, he's got the best look and idea and thought process. He knows a lot of the scriptures, all these different things. And what he wants is your loyalty no matter what. The wild part is a narcissist wants your loyalty while he's cheating on you and then is offended when you actually leave because that's not Christian. That's not spiritual. That's not the right look that he needs to have in his life. And so a lot of times he'll demand this loyalty, this admiration, regardless of what he's putting you through, just to be able to get what he wants. Think of it this way. You might have been in a church or in a place of worship where the pastor or the leader uses their position of authority to manipulate the congregation, to manipulate them to give this blind obedience to teachings, to decisions, while exploiting the vulnerability of other people for his own personal gain. This is the same thing that you'll see in a toxic relationship. A narcissist that will exploit you to be able to get what he wants out of the relationship. Like whatever he has to do to be able to maintain control and to get what he wants out of the relationship. This is where it gets really real when we talk about it from a Christian's perspective, because what people don't want to talk about in the church then is coercion. Yeah. Topic that people want to talk about. Marital rape. Another tough one that people don't want to talk about. Because they don't want to own up to the fact that, oh, I forced you to do this because I told you I was the spiritual leader and you're supposed to submit. That's a bunch of bullshit. A lot of times you'll find people that use and manipulate scripture to appear superior to another person, to extract value out of them without caring about the other person at all. A lot of times you will see a narcissist that will do whatever it takes to get you subservient to them and to get you doing what they want you to do. Doesn't matter. They'll use religion, they'll use Christianity, they'll use skewed Bible texts from pulling it from different places, twisting the scripture to actually get what they want so that they look good and they get what they want and you have to submit. Sometimes you're going to see this aspect with the grandiosity and superiority that these Christian narcissists exhibit towards other people and towards you, believing that they have special and exclusive connection. Like they might view themselves as being spiritually superior to other people and use this belief to assert dominance, to assert entitlement, control over another person. Like this specialness connects them to God or connects them to a higher power, saying, oh, this is what I have to be able to gain your admiration, to be able to gain control over you. And also to dismiss your perspective, your idea, your thought process because you're spiritually inferior. Now, I've been skirting around a piece of this topic about a Christian narcissist, and that's if you've seen some of my videos before, you also know that I don't think this truly exists. Especially when you talk about it in the negative light of a Christian abuser, which is what we've been listing and talking through this entire time. Because there's people out there that think, oh, well, he says he's a Christian, but he's also abusing me. I don't think those two things can coexist. You're like, well, that seems a little harsh because you're judging that person's spirituality. No, I'm judging that person's fruit. If you're like, well, you can't judge a person, then you need to read the Bible and figure it out, because that's not true. By their works, by their fruit, you shall know them. So if we want to work on scripture, let's go back and forth. When we talk through this aspect of Christianity and religion, if the person is not demonstrating a changed lifestyle, if they're not demonstrating growth in their life, if they're not demonstrating how they're actually moving forward in loving you, they're not showing any fruit of being a Christian. They're not. You might be thinking, well, you can't judge this person. You can't decide if they're a Christian or not. I can say by what the evidence is there, whether they are or not. Now, if they actually are or not, that's up to God to decide. But it's up to you to make a choice about how you're going to show up in the relationship, or how you're going to leave the relationship based on the toxicity that is getting thrown at you. If you want, we can talk about Christianity and divorce in the Bible and all that kind of stuff in another video. I'm not going to dive into that rabbit hole. But understanding that a person is going to use and utilize Christianity and religion to abuse you, to manipulate you, and a Christian abuser does not exist. It's just an abuser. Because you cannot have someone that is said and that is claimed to be impacted by the God of the universe and not walk away changed. That person is just a liar. And that's what we see a lot of times, liars that hide behind Christianity. If this video resonated with you at all, please leave a comment, like, share, rate, review, send it to someone else, because we want to spread the news about narcissism and how it infiltrates into all aspects of your life. If you're at the place where you found this video helpful, then you might want to watch some of the videos on your screen to be able to help you in your healing journey and to move forward. Y'all have a blessed day. Did you deal with a Christian narcissist or a Christian abuser, or someone that used religion to be able to mask the abusive natures that they did to you on a day-to-day basis? Have you ever encountered individuals who would use religion as a tool to be able to control and manipulate other people? What does it mean to be a Christian abuser, and how does their behavior differ from that of other abusers? And join me today as we delve into the complex topic of Christian abuse, exploring their tactics, the concept of sexual coercion, and debunking the notion of Christian abusers that they're somehow different than other abusers. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness of narcissistic abuse. I'm the founder of Raw Motivations, the creator of the Narc app, and your guide in the 7-day challenge called Escape Toxicity, the 7-day challenge to healing. It's our way to be able to help first give you the first step in moving forward in that healing process of understanding narcissistic abuse, reactive abuse, the guilt of being with a narcissist, and ultimately helping you step forward in dealing with the triggers and the story that you're telling yourself in that toxic situation. You can access that at escapetoxicity.com today, or if you want to work one-on-one with me, you can go to rawmotivations.com. So when we talk about this aspect of Christianity and religion and abuse, it oftentimes gets mixed all together and muddled together. So to give you an overview of like where I'm coming from, I'm a Christian. Okay, so understanding like, hey, he has a perspective that is coming from inside, where a lot of people view this aspect of like Christian abuse. And you might be surprised when we get to the third point of what I actually think about it and where we're actually going with this. Okay, so I want to shed light on Christian abuse and the harmful tactics. Okay, defining it, looking at like what it actually is, and how a lot of times people use religion to try to control, to manipulate, to be able to force people to do things that don't even match up, even in like religion. Okay, by helping you just understand like awareness of this, like this is a piece that a lot of people do not realize is even a thing, and a lot of people that are inside Christianity don't even realize that it's happening inside as well. Okay, so the first aspect that I want you to understand is misusing religion for control. Now, I'm not just talking about like a pastor or a priest like misusing that for control, but I'm also talking about your partner. I'm talking about how he actually shows up in the relationship, telling you like you need to do X, Y, and Z because of this. Christian abusers oftentimes employ religious teachings and beliefs as a means of exerting power and control over you. So like, you don't like this, well, you're supposed to submit because it says you're supposed to submit over here. You're supposed to respect me because it says respect me over here. Leaving a lot of other pieces out of context where they're actually supposed to love you, but they're not actually showing love. Oftentimes they're going to exploit authority as far as like within the religious realm of like, I have authority over you. I'm more important than you. I'm better than you. This is not just a man versus woman thing, but a lot of times you will see that, where it says like, oh, see, it says here, like, I'm the stronger version. You're supposed to submit to me. You're supposed to bow down, versus like this mutual respect of both people working together. Oftentimes you don't see that in religious organizations. You don't see that in Christianity. Instead, you only see one person that's like lording it over. Like, you're my servant, you're my slave, you're just the housewife. And it's not really an effective way of working together to be able to move forward in a healthy environment. So a lot of times you'll see narcissists that will exploit their authority. Like, let me do what I want to do, but put it in a religious context to manipulate you in accepting it and to giving into it. Now, you'll see this a lot of times going back and forth, but then you also see it in a very hypocritical way, where you'll see the narcissist that does one thing, but then holds you accountable for that same thing that you do, but uses it in a religious context of like, I can't believe you sinned in that way. I can't believe you did that. Well, you're like, you just cheated. Yeah, but I can't believe you sinned by disrespecting me. Like, sometimes like a crazy like parallel, but like you'll see this happen where narcissists will accuse you of something or try to hold you accountable for something, but they're not holding themselves accountable. So exploiting this authority by using the religious context to manipulate you, to shame you, to put you down, to make you feel bad about yourself. So ultimately they feel better about themselves. And the last aspect is just to enforce obedience, to get compliance out of you by saying, look, this is what you're supposed to do. It says right here in the good book, you got to follow this rule, which means you need to follow me, which means you need to serve me. Okay. This does not apply to people that are in toxic relationships. Like, you do not have to conform to someone else's beliefs or someone else's viewpoint just because they slap a Bible verse on it. Abuse is abuse no matter what. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. Like, you'll get to the place where the person will distort what they're actually doing, what they're actually reading. They'll distort the scripture. They'll distort like the Bible, like other sacred texts. They'll distort those and use it to enforce gender roles and use it to enforce religious rituals to justify abusive behaviors. It's important if you understand they're going to use different things to try to twist and manipulate to justify. Okay, so think of it this way: you might have a Christian abuser who's using selective interpretations of biblical passages to justify abusive actions. Well, it says I can do this, such as claiming that a wife should submit unquestionably to her husband's authority, even if it involves mistreatment or coercion. That's not in the Bible, but people want to be able to say it is. At the end of the day, like, the Bible is talking about this mutual respect, this mutual submission one to another, not one person being like Lord over the other person submitting to them. It's not talking about that. It's talking about mutual respect. The problem is people don't want to do that, and people are unwilling to do that. And you shouldn't have mutual respect when one person is abusing you. So you need to be able to see like the context here. They use religious in teaching to enforce strict rules, regulations. You have to comply, which oftentimes will isolate you from other support networks. Those people aren't good for you. They're not Christian. They're not connected. Your family isn't supporting us the way they should. All these different pieces. Okay. Now, this steps into the sticky subject that people don't want to talk about majority of the time, called understanding sexual coercion. Sexual coercion is a form of abuse characterized by manipulation and control of the person's sexuality, oftentimes involving pressure, intimidation, or deception. Oftentimes, this will look in the relationship, in the marriage, as marital rape. Like, this is where the other person is pushing onto another person when they're saying no, but the other person is like, you are my wife, and it's dictated by the sacred text, it's dictated by the Bible, it's dictated by whatever, taking stuff out of context, that you need to give me what I want. So therefore, I get what I want, and I'm going to take it from you no matter what, because you're supposed to submit. Okay, this is very real and very prevalent in a lot of Christianity. Okay, people that take advantage of other people under the guise of, well, we're married, so I get to do what I want with you. Wrong. Abuse is still abuse no matter what. Oftentimes, this will push you and like pressure you, intimidate you, like put you down, put you in a place where you're like, oh, I guess this is what I have to do. Christian abusers exploit religious teachings about purity, about modesty, and submission to coerce victims into unwanted sexual acts. Make it even more challenging for you to speak out due to religious guilt and religious shame. And so they put you in this cycle of you're like, well, I should talk about this. I should actually come clean about this. I should ask for help, but you can't do that. because the religious structure that you're in already shames people for that, already puts people down. You see this happen so much with a religious organization that you're in, wants people to conform versus actually have a relationship. Wants people to look a certain way versus actually being honest and real. Christian abuser, he may guilt you into, engaging in sexual acts by referencing the teachings in their religion on marital duties or the consequences of denying them. Oftentimes making it your fault. Like, if you deny me, then I guess I need to get it from somewhere else. You're like, how does it even make sense? A lot of times they'll still use that. They use religious rhetoric to convince you of that your resistance or your refusal to their unwanted sexual advances is sinful, exploiting their religious beliefs and justifying their own sexual gratification without regard to you, without regard to your own consent in the process. Like, this is a big piece that people do not talk about, but needs to be brought out. This happens a lot more, I believe, in Christian circles because of the abuse of let me use this as an excuse to do what I want to another person. So, last thing that I want to bring up, I kind of mentioned this earlier, is this idea of a Christian abuser. So for me, contrary to popular belief, Christian abusers, I don't think are in their own distinct category because I also don't think that they're Christian. Abusers that identify with Christians as a Christian is still an abuser. Their actions don't align with true principles of Christianity, with true principles of how they've been grown or changed or developed. And it's important to actually separate their distorted interpretation of religion and themselves from the genuine values of love, compassion, respect taught by Christianity. At the end of the day, how a lot of times I'll say it is a Christian abuser does not exist. Doesn't. Okay? Because a person cannot say to you, I am a Christian, meaning I've been impacted by the God of the universe and have a changed and a transformed life because of that. Person cannot say that and then continue to abuse. Doesn't work that way. The Bible even says, by their fruit you shall know them. So like when someone is consistently abusing, they can't be a Christian. When someone's showing up in a healthy and loving, respectful way, they're not abusing. And you see, so when we walk through this, you need to be able to understand by the fruit of another person, you can actually know if what they're saying is true or not. Like if what they're saying is real or not. He's saying he's a Christian, but he's consistently putting you in a place of coercion. And that's not a Christian. That's not Christ-like. That's not someone who is emulating what they actually believe, emulating what the religion actually teaches and preaches. See, this is the piece that I hate that gets construed by societies. People that say, like, well, my narcissist was a Christian, my abuser was a Christian. Now I'm like, no, they weren't. Because if they're consistently acting that way, they were not Christ-like at all. They didn't actually have an impact with the God of the universe, but instead thought they were their own God, and as a result, they could make up their own rules, their own regulations, and do whatever they wanted. That's not a Christian abuser. That's just an abuser. That's not someone who actually cares about you. That's just someone who's very entitled about themselves. Thinks that they're the center of the universe, and that's it. If this resonated with you at all, one, share it with other people, and then two, leave a comment down below. If you're like, hey, I want to talk more about this. I want to dive into like, how do I actually navigate this? How do I navigate the abuse, the divorce, all the different pieces? Then please reach out for help. You can go to rawmotivation.com, sign up for one-on-one. We can talk about you being a good fit moving forward and working together and helping you navigate the ins and outs and the hard pieces of healing from a toxic relationship. And if you haven't already, subscribe, rate, review. Thanks so much for listening on the podcast or watching on the video today. Have you ever encountered someone who appears deeply devout on the surface, but seems to use religious beliefs, their thoughts, different aspects to manipulate and control you or the people around them? Maybe you're wondering, like, what's the difference between someone who has genuine faith or actually believes in God or actually is a Christian or ascribes to a religious organization or whatever it might be, but there's also this manipulative behavior? Like, what's actually going on there? Do you actually see the difference? How does it even make sense? I want to dive into a little bit of religious narcissism, where the lines between faith and manipulation start to become blurred. I want to talk about like just discovering it, addressing it, and helping get you through some of the aspects in the thought process of what's going on. You see, a lot of times in faith-based communities, a lot of times people will turn spiritual beliefs for guidance, comfort, sense of community, and a lot of times these will turn into manipulative things. There's instances where people use religious identity as a mask, as a version of a facade of like, I look this way, I show up this way, I'm a good person, to perpetuate this emotional, psychological, and spiritual manipulation of you and other people. Oftentimes, when we look at this being like religious narcissists will use other people to exploit their trust, vulnerability, and to further their own agendas. One of the things that I come from the background is I come from religious background. I come as a Christian into this frame of understanding, hey, what I see is a lot of Christians and a lot of religious people that are very fake. And you see a lot of narcissism that's in the church, just like you see it in politics, just like you see it in life, just like you see it in coworkers and relationships. It's everywhere. It's not just in one spot. But one spot that doesn't get talked about a lot is this aspect of religious narcissist and the facade that actually happens there. So let's dive in. So when we talk about the facade of righteousness, okay, at the core of religious narcissism lies a carefully crafted facade of righteousness, of looking good, of being right. Just like you'd see with a normal narcissist of like, I'm a good person, right? Like, this is me. But when we bring in this other frame of religion, it's like, wait a second, it's not just like I'm a good person. It's like, I am righteous. I am good. Now, these people oftentimes will prey on other people that do not understand or that do not believe or that are at a place where they are not at the depth or the level to be able to understand. So as a result, they're going to engage in different displays to try to manipulate what you're actually seeing. Like aspect of displays of piety, including regular attendance of religious services, maybe these prayers, maybe public acts of charity, something that oftentimes is outward facing that people see them do. You see this all the time where you see narcissists that go to church and they put on a mask and they show up and everybody's like, wow, they have a great family. They look great, and they go home and they abuse their family. Happens all the time. People don't realize it because a lot of time in churches and religious organizations, nobody talks about the dark stuff. Everybody's like, hey, this is great. Let's love God. Let's do all these things. And it doesn't really get down to, hey, how are you actually doing with your relationship? Oh, everything's great. Is it really? There's not a depth a lot of times, which shows there's not a lot of honesty. And so what happens is a narcissist projects this image of moral virtue, of how they look good. And they start to gain admiration and trust from the people around them. But the problem is, this is just a cover. This is just a manipulative mask for others to be able to see. Think of it this way. You might have had someone in your life, maybe your partner, maybe a spouse, and he portrays himself as a devout follower of his faith, participating in community events, charity work, but behind closed doors, he uses that influence to control and emotionally abuse you. He uses it to get you subservient to him. Of like, you need to comply to me. I'm the person who's supposed to lead you, so therefore you're supposed to comply. You're supposed to be less than. Like, I do all these things, what do? You just stay at home. Like, putting you down, belittling you, all these different things. But in public, guys are connected and good. It's what it looks like on the surface. This is why it's so hard for people to be able to identify it, because when they see it on the surface, people are like, oh, things are great. And oftentimes, because of the fear of how he's going to treat you at home, you're also scared to be able to say anything of like, no, it's not great. It actually sucks. Because then you'll be shunned in the religious organization because, well, you're not respecting your husband, or you're not looking a certain way, or you're not acting a certain way, because a lot of that's about conformity than it is about connection. So you have that one aspect. Then you have the piece of spiritual manipulation. Narcissists exploit the deeply personal and sensitive nature of religious beliefs to manipulate other people. They may use the guilt, shame, or fear, not just of themselves, but of divine punishment. Of like, well, if you do that, God's going to punish you. If you do that, it goes against what we believe. If you do that, like, the church is going to be upset. If you do this, all to be able to control, all to be able to manipulate, to keep you stuck in a certain type of box or a frame. This is one thing that is hard for a lot of people to grasp, because so many people, let me say, like, to Christians, so many Christians have God in a certain box. God only allows this. God only does this. And there's no aspect of love or tolerance of what's actually happening. And people think you have to conform to a certain image before you can be accepted versus like you have to have a relationship before you can do anything else. And so narcissists will try to make you conform to that box, using things like carefully selecting scripture, religious teachings, twisting the tenets of faith to suit their own agendas, to make it look like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. Did you know you're supposed to act this way? Like, this is what will happen where you'll end up having fear. Like, you end up having the shame, the guilt. You end up having different things to manipulate the other person to follow every command. Maybe he's done this in your life, making you fear the end result, making you fear salvation, eternal damnation, whatever it might be. Making you fear that that is the only person that can actually lead you out of it, that can actually lead you towards or guide you towards salvation, and you keep trusting that person. So then we move into another aspect, and this one I want to call it divine entitlement. Okay? Narcissists, we know, are entitled, right? Like, everything is mine. Like, I'm entitled to you, I'm entitled to other things. But like, what happens when you bring in like religious aspect? Okay, religious narcissists often believe that they're divinely chosen or especially appointed by a higher power. Some would even go to the place of being like, I am a prophet, I am God, I am all these different things. Like, it gets really skewy and it doesn't make sense, but like, that's the thought process. And the sense of the divine entitlement fuels the belief that they have the authority to be able to control you, control the congregation, control the people, whatever it might be. And like, this elevated like spiritual status, this elevated hierarchy of like, I am better than you, gives them this aspect to continue to justify their actions, demand unwavering loyalty against things that are not right, against things that are not scripturally based or not in the religion that they're currently in. And so a man might claim to have received a direct message from a higher power, which he uses as justification for exerting control over your decisions. Like, I got this from God, so therefore you have to do this. God doesn't work that way. Like, he doesn't control and force other people to do things. If God's telling him to do something, he should do it. But that's not for you, as far as like you have to comply to that. But a lot of times they will use and twist and script it out to try to make it so that you comply to what they want you to do, using the divine, using religion, using Christianity as a form of saying, this is why you have to do what I'm telling you to do. So then we move into the aspect of isolation and also dependency. Things that are often inside narcissism as a whole, but in religion, it takes like a slightly different twist. Like, they might isolate you from the friends, the family, support systems. Like, we get that, okay? But by convincing you that the only interpretation of the faith, the religion, the Christian organization, whatever it might be, that only their interpretation is valid. Like, slowly, like, getting rid of other people's opinions and thoughts and ideas because they're like, yeah, no, that's not true. And they're trying to lead, quote unquote, and guide you and mold you into the person they want you to be by saying, hey, these people are not right. And in doing this, it slowly severs connections. Do you realize that a lot of times Christian organizations are supposed to be the most connected because they're connected under God? But oftentimes they're the most diverse because they can't agree on like two tiny points. Not even like big points, but like two tiny points. Same thing you see in like politics. Like, people will get divided over small things. And they'll forget that there's a human on the other side that's actually talking, and they don't actually take the time to listen or understand the other person. Side note, we're not going to go down that road. Okay? But by severing these connections, they create a dependency where you start to depend on the narcissist for spiritual guidance, for validation. Like, this could be where he's convinced you that interacting with anyone else that doesn't share their exact spiritual beliefs is sinful. Cutting them off from your network. This is something that I even did. Of like, well, that's not what we believe. That's not true. That's not the direction we go. And it started to pull my wife away from other people that weren't bad people at all, but they didn't have the same exact alignment. Who's going to have the same exact alignment? Not everybody. But a narcissist will want to make sure that it is only their opinion, only what matters to them, not to anyone else. So they'll pull you away from other people to be able to manipulate, to be able to control you. Part of the whole aspect of this is just trying to bring awareness of religious narcissism, of like what it actually is, what it actually does, and like how it's like subtle. It's subtle. Like, it's hard to pick up. What I need you to understand is like when you have people pushing against you this way or trying to control you, start to do your own research into the religious organization, the Christianity, the aspect of God, whatever it might be, to start finding that out and true for you. Because there's not supposed to be one person that everything comes through. Like when we talk about Christianity, and I mentioned earlier, it's about conformity versus connection. It's about you conforming a lot of times to a certain image than it is you having a direct connection to God. But a narcissist will try to make sure that that's severed, and a narcissist will try to make sure that your connection is only to them. That dependence piece is only to them. If you're struggling with this today, you might be stuck in the religious frame of like, well, I can't get divorced, so I can't do this. Well, this won't happen. I'll be shunned if I do this. I'll be kicked out. I'll be all these things. And I want to encourage you that God is not the God that is allowing the abuse. Like he's not one that's like, hey, I want you to stay in an abusive relationship. I want you to stay stuck with an abusive person. I want you to stay with a liar. Even if we use scripture to be able to back that up and to be able to show that. In the Old Testament, it goes into aspects where it was agreed upon for them to be able to get divorced because of abuse, because of how men were actually treating women. They were refusing to actually give them a divorce so they could pull them back and do anything they wanted to them and go be with someone else. Sound a little familiar? So like, understand that like the current frame you might be in or thinking because of the religion, because of the organization that you're in, might not be true. What would that look like if you were actually able to get free and focus on you, your growth, your change, your development? If we could be of any help with that, would love to be able to talk to you. You can go to rawmotivations.com, click on the one-on-ones. Would love to help you there. Hey, just want to jump in here really quick and say you might have been watching my content for a period of time, but you haven't taken the next step. You haven't taken the next moment, the next idea, the next thought to actually change your life. And I want to provide you with a couple different options. One of the ways is to be able to work with me personally inside the Thriver Intensive. What I do inside of there is help you break the trauma bond, eradicate the triggers, and move forward in the healing process. You got 24/7 access to me. You've got access to other women who are going through it, access to other coaches, but a support system that you need to finally break free once and for all, and to make sure that you don't go back, that you don't interact with them again, and that you finally find peace. If you're interested in knowing a little bit more about this, then click on the link down below, but it'll be rawmotivations.com/breakthrough. You'll be able to hear a little bit from me. You'll be able to hear a little bit from my wife and be able to hear a little bit more about what I do to help you move forward. If that resonates with you, click on the link below, rawmotivations.com/breakthrough. Inside of the church and religion, narcissism runs rampant so many times simply because of the uplifting and the pushing up of there being one person in the church that is the best or that is the most as far as like, oh, he's the most spiritual. He's the one that is this. And you see this time and time again based on pastors. And the reason why I bring it up in this direction of like pastors is because pastors are also the ones that get lifted up so high and also crucified so easily. Simply because they're human. But oftentimes we'll elevate them to a place where they aren't human, where they are just this amazing person that can do no wrong. And then until they finally do the biggest wrong, then, oh, well, now they're an awful person. Typically, this is where you see pastors that are completely just obliterated from their ministries because of decisions that they made. Openings that they put into their life that allowed cheating to come in, that allowed lying to come in, that allowed manipulation to come in, that all of a sudden was okay for a period of time until people found out, and then poof, you're the worst thing ever. Now, inside of this place, it puts oftentimes pastors at a place where they have to keep an image, right? Because other people are expecting this. I'm not playing the line of like, oh, he's a victim and he has to do this. I'm just saying this is oftentimes reality. Because the church expects the pastor to be perfect. A lot of churches do. They're like, oh, no, that's not my church. Okay, well, welcome to majority of Christianity that's fake. A lot of churches want the pastor to be perfect. They want it to be fun. They want it to be happy. They want it to be good. They don't want to deal with the dark shit that's actually happening in the pastor's life, in his own life, in the parishioner's life, whoever. You see this when you go to churches and you see the happy piece of church, but you don't see the shitty piece of church. And that's because the majority of people are running away from it. They're running away from bringing their darkness in and saying, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Instead, it's like, hey, let's have a great day and let's smile and be fake at the same time. This happens all the time. Parents coming in to church where they're screaming at their kids, screaming at their wife, like arguments, issues, big fights that then walk in, they're like, yeah, we're great. Putting on a mask. The majority of Christianity and a lot of religions also just put on masks when they show up to church, to religious organizations, and it is one of the most infused, besides maybe politics, one of the most infused mask-wearing organizations out there. Simply because people don't want to show their shit. They don't want to say, hey, something's wrong. Like, I'm struggling in this. Like, the marriage is falling apart. Early on inside of our marriage, where I cheated, where there was this disconnection, where there's these arguments, where these fights, the first year of our marriage was hell. Like, both Kayla and I will both attest to that. And it was before any cheating happened. Simply because we didn't understand how to operate. We didn't understand how to communicate. We didn't understand how to get along. And there was also the abusive asshole of me that was narcissistic coming into the relationship that I didn't know was going on. So I just kept doing what I was going to do. Making sure I win arguments at all costs. Making sure I was the one in charge. All this kind of stupid stuff. But inside of that, I didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to communicate. There was no connection there. There was just frustration. And marriage, at that point, we were like, this is awful. Like, why would anyone want to get married if this is what the reality is? Like, this is awful. Now, the wild thing about this is inside of Christianity and religion and the churches we were involved in, we didn't want to show that shit to everybody else. We didn't want to show that we were struggling. Simply because everyone else around us, quote unquote, wasn't struggling. We didn't see it. There's nothing to identify. We're like, well, they have a great marriage. They have a great marriage. They have a great marriage. It just must be us. It must be an issue that we have. We just have a communication problem. We just need to figure this out. We just need to pray more and we'll magically get better. But in reality, what was happening is there wasn't other people that just had amazing marriages. There was other people that had really awful marriages, but they weren't willing to share it, just like we weren't. This is another piece that keeps people in toxic relationships way too long when they're inside certain religious organizations, simply because it's frowned upon to get divorced. And as a result, he continues to beat his wife. But don't get divorced. It's frowned upon to separate, but it still lets him emotionally and mentally abuse. It's frowned upon to move away or to get an order of protection, but he continues to abuse sexually or emotionally. This happens inside the Christian world where a lot of people will make sure you stay stuck in the relationship because it's not quote unquote biblical to leave. But in reality, when you're dealing with this, when you're struggling with a toxic relationship, the thing is you need to understand that there's more people out there that are dealing with the same exact thing. Church doesn't share that with you. They don't show that. They oftentimes show a mask. So you see inside of religion, you see pastors that have masks, some because the congregation wants them to have a mask, some because the pastor then has to put up a mask because he doesn't want to reveal who he actually is. You see the people that come to church that all bring their own masks saying, hey, I don't want to actually deal with the fact that, our marriage is failing, that I was looking at pornography, that I'm struggling in this, all of these things that people come to the church service with. And it's wild because some people are like, oh, well, this is why the church is struggling. This is why the church is not having revival. Yeah, no shit, because there's not people that are actually following God underneath the surface. Just on the surface. Just enough to be able to pass the litmus test of smile and have a good day, but it's a mask. You don't have to be a narcissist to have a mask. Okay, mask oftentimes we equate with narcissism, mask, right? But you don't have to be a narcissist to have a mask. You can just be human. And you simply being human and not wanting to actually share your vulnerable truth with the world puts up a mask. Everybody lies. Everybody lies. You end up lying about what you're telling other people simply when you don't tell the full and honest truth, when you don't show up vulnerable. When you don't show up vulnerable to yourself, then you can't show up vulnerable to other people. The simple fact that you might be struggling inside the healing aspect because you're not willing to be vulnerable and honest with yourself about the situation. Instead, you keep avoiding it, running away from it, being like, it's okay, it's not that big of a deal, it's just him, he's just struggling, it'll get better, he'll finally figure it out, and you're not actually looking at the facts. And when you don't look at the facts, you ignore truth, you ignore reality, and you continue to move forward thinking this will get better when reality nothing has. You develop your own version of truth. You start to lie. You develop your own mask that makes you look and feel and seem better to the world when in reality you're dying inside. You're dying because of how he's treating you on a day-to-day basis, how he's making you feel. The emotion, the mental manipulation that's confusing you, that's frustrating you, that's leaving you distraught and wondering, what am I even going to do? How am I even going to process this? How am I even going to focus at work? How am I even going to go in? How am I going to even show up? All of these things that put you into a place of chaos and confusion simply because of your avoidance of truth. You see, everybody lies. And when I say that, I don't mean that everybody's showing up intentionally being a liar, being like, I'm going to lie today about that. No, I'm saying a lot of people do not do the work to get underneath. Like underneath the surface of what's actually going on. The emotions, the feelings, the things, the stories that you're telling yourself. This is part of my journey, is getting underneath this, seeing what is underneath. How do I figure out what's the story that I'm telling myself? Something that is lower and deeper and darker that I haven't dealt with yet, that I need to in order to grow, to move to the next level. Next level of who I am. Who I am inside of how I show up mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationship-wise, business-wise, everything. Because this whole life that we're living is about expansion, growth, and development. This is why God has actually placed you on the earth, to expand, to grow, to develop. He even says in Genesis to have dominion over the earth. This isn't a manipulation or a lordship over. This is a piece of saying, hey, he said expand, grow, develop, become amazing. But oftentimes we relegate that and we slow it down and we limit ourselves based on the story we're telling ourselves, based on the lie that you're believing. The lie that you're believing that you've manufactured to stay in the relationship. The lie that you're believing because he projected it onto you so much you finally started to think that it's true. When in reality, it's just him pushing his agenda, pushing his thought process onto you. And it's not actually true at all. When we talk about this piece of masks, you're going to see masks so many times inside of Christianity, inside of different religions. And one of the things growing up inside of deep Christianity, like Southern Baptist conventions, like being in this whole piece of Christianity. The big thing that was not preached and not told, but was exemplified, was conformity over connection. You had to conform to the image of what needed to happen versus have a connection with God. You had to show up looking a certain way, acting a certain way, being a certain way. Remember who you are versus who you are in connection with God. We see this all the time inside of churches, inside of religion, where people are more concerned about being conforming to a certain image than they are having a divine connection with God. Masks are everywhere. It's not just with narcissists. It's not just with narcissism. Masks are prevalent everywhere. Politics, massive. But you also have religion, massive. Because the mask that a person puts on is to be able to keep other people from seeing the vulnerable, real, raw truth underneath you. And that's one of the most precious things you could actually give to the world. Your real truth. Like what's actually underneath, your raw feelings, being able to say, this is what's going on. But when you hide that, you limit other people from healing. You limit yourself from exposing and growing and developing you. You limit the healing process from even being able to happen. Simply because the mask that you're under, the mask that you're using is keeping you stuck. If you feel stuck inside the relationship, outside the relationship, or you're trying to figure out how do you heal, I want you to reach out for help. Go to rawmotivations.com today to learn more. Is narcissism in the Bible? There's a lot of people that think it is. There's a lot of people that think it isn't. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit today and give you just a snapshot, my perspective. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel that has been not just diagnosed with NPD, but also is looking to how do I grow and change and develop who I am? How do I transform how I show up? So some of you might watch and be like, he doesn't seem like a narcissist. Well, yeah, because 5 years ago, like there's a completely different version of me. My journey has been documenting the transformation that's happened inside of my life, how I show up to my wife, to my kids, to God, to how I'm showing up here today to help you understand narcissism, narcissistic abuse, and provide an opportunity for you to have freedom from the toxic guy that's in your life. If I can help with that, you can go to rawmotivations.com. We'd love to be able to talk to you today. Today, we're going to be diving in just a little bit into narcissism in the Bible. I'm not going to go into a super long, in depth over the entire piece of the Bible. We're just going to take a snapshot. This is one of my favorite passages that talk through, I think, give a good perspective of narcissism. So you might be listening to me and be like, oh, great, this is what the conversation is today. Well, hopefully it was in the title, but if not, then yeah, it's the conversation. So stick around, or not stick around, but this is what we're going to be talking about because I think it's applicable to a lot of people that what they're struggling with. There's a lot of Christians and a lot of people in the religious culture that are dealing and struggling with narcissism and narcissistic abuse. The problem is a lot of times the religious culture and structure is oftentimes providing more space for more and more narcissists to be born and created, simply because they're living oftentimes plastic lives. This is one of the most difficult and frustrating things about seeing different churches, different religions, different Christianity circles that are not actually willing to be transparent and honest. So this perpetuates more lies. It perpetuates shame. It perpetuates some of the very same things that produce narcissism and narcissistic abuse. So you have this perpetuate over a long period of time. It's no wonder that you're going to see more and more narcissists come out of the church structure and the religious sphere, simply because a lot of what is preached and focused on is conformity versus connection. How do I know that? Because that's what I grew up in all of my life. Baptist, Southern Baptist, like conservative, evangelical, like all those different pieces all grew up inside of that. And the majority of what was caught, not just taught, but caught of understanding was you need to look, appear, and act a certain way. But a relationship with God that's a loving, kind Father that wants the best for you, like that was different. That was weird. So there's a lot of different pieces there, and we'll soapbox on some stuff today, but come along for the ride, okay? Narcissism in the Bible, the passage that I really resonate with a lot, and when I read this, I was just like, oh my gosh, here it is. I was like, here's definition of narcissism in the Bible, is Jude. And so, like, if you have your Bibles today, flip over to Jude. This sounds so weird. Jude. And Jude in the Bible, the book in the Bible, Jude, it has this section where it's talking about judgment on false teachers. And it's actually this like attack on false teachers, and it's calling false teachers out. And it uses different examples. It compares to angels. There's a couple different things that happen inside of here. But the main piece that I want to go off of is some of what they're describing as the false teachers. So this is going to apply to Christian and religious organizations of having false teachers there. It's also going to apply to, you have to be a liar to be a false teacher, right? You have to be a liar to be a cheater. Like you have to be a liar to do some of these abusive things. And this is really what the crux of a lot of this comes down to, is you'll never have a narcissist change until he's willing to be honest. If he's not willing to be honest, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to get different. Nothing's going to be better. So if we flip over into Jude, what we're going to see is a couple different things. It's talking about many different aspects on this judgment of false teachers. Now, it talks into different ways, but as I'm going to start here, let's see, verse 3. It's like, hey, I was eager to write you about the common salvation. I found it necessary to write, appealing to you to contend for the faith that was once delivered to all the saints. Like, hey, I need to actually fight here a little bit because there's stuff coming into the church, into the area that's going to screw it up, okay? He says, for certain people have crept in unnoticed, who long ago were designated for this condemnation, ungodly people who pervert the grace of our God into sensuality and deny our only Master and Lord Jesus Christ, okay? Now, if you're new here, you're like, what is this guy doing? Where are we going? Just bear with me for a second. Okay, he's just talking about liars, and he's talking about people that are sneaking into the religious organization to be able to corrupt it. To be able to say, hey, if this is the principle you believe, I'm going to come in, I'm going to slowly pervert it. I'm just going to push it to the side. This is what narcissists do to your life all the time. He doesn't come in and say, no, you can't go talk to that person. No, you need to stop your career and come be with me. But he says the subtle things that get you to change your trajectory. Like to get you to slide off the side of the road, to sideline you on a day-to-day basis, that's normal. Because what he's doing is he's planting small seeds to try to make sure you're drifting out of the path that you're actually called to go down, or that you actually want to go down. And so inside of the church here, and that Jude's talking to, he's like, hey, there's these people that are infiltrating. Like they've actually been infiltrating into the church, and they're actually pulling people away. Because they're making things appear sensual that aren't sensual. They're perverting things that don't need to be perverted. Sounds like a lot of our culture in a lot of ways. Anyways, now I want to remind you all, though, that once you fully knew that Jesus, who saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. And then it talks through this piece of angels, and it moves into Sodom and Gomorrah, where it talks about, hey, here's a bunch of people that were practicing a lot of sexual morality, bestiality, a bunch of like crazy stuff. But there serves an example of like, hey, if you continue going down this road, like you're going to get consumed by it and it's going to destroy you. Okay. All right. Moving on. It says, yet in like manner, these people also relying on dreams, defile their flesh, reject authority, and blaspheme the glorious ones. Okay, so it's people that are not willing to be in this reality. They're like, hey, I'm going to believe something different. I'm going to project on other things, and I'm going to continue to reject other people, reject authority, reject other people in my life, all those aspects. Okay, then we're going to dive down to verse 11. Woe to them, for they walked in the way of Cain and abandoned themselves for the sake to gain Balaam's error and Parosh and colors of. Okay, we're going to skip that for right now. There we go. Verse 12. They are hidden reefs at your love feasts. Okay, this is where it gets interesting, I think. Okay, think of it like, so reefs. So we're talking about like boating. We're talking about ocean. Okay, a reef can look very beautiful and can be amazing for you to snorkel and be able to go underwater, see a bunch of fish. But for boats, a reef oftentimes is extremely dangerous, especially if it's hidden, because the boat will run aground. Okay, imagine like you have a giant cruise ship and it doesn't see a reef. One is going to wreak havoc. It could break apart the ship. It could destroy the ship. But also, like, think for a moment, if you're on a cruise ship and it goes and it's going quickly and it gets stuck on a reef, like, how long are you going to be stuck there till another boat gets there to like tow you off? Like, it just sounds wild. But anyways, like hidden reef, something that's actually destructive. But then it says at your love feast. So like when you think that you're connected, that you're loving, that everything's going together, hey, by the way, this guy that's in your life, he's a hidden reef. He's getting ready to actually destroy you. You just don't see it yet. You can't see it because it looks great. The waves are awesome. The water's fine. Come on in. But then as you keep getting closer, you start to run aground simply because this person has a hidden agenda, has a hidden reef underneath. So this is where I'm talking about narcissism in the Bible. As they feast with you without fear. This is one of the fascinating pieces. Feasting with you without fear. He's eating with you, not worried about you catching him, not worried about you holding him accountable, not worrying about anything, because he doesn't fear you, because he doesn't respect you, because he doesn't care about you. Sound familiar? We've talked about this in different contexts. Shepherds feeding themselves instead of like feeding other people, helping other people. So shepherds is talking about not just like sheep, but it's also talking about like feeding the flock. Okay, we see this a lot of times in biblical reference of like the pastor helping others. So like it's talking about false teachers. So it's like, I'm taking care of myself, but you, yeah, you fend for yourself. See if you can last without the wolves. So like you need to be able to see like he's only focused on himself. He's only focused on what he wants in the moment. Everybody else, everything else doesn't matter. Okay. Waterless clouds swept along by winds. Super cool. Waterless clouds. Looking and seeing and hoping that cloud is going to have water to be able to produce water for your crops, for them to be able to flourish. But it said they're waterless. And so it's almost like this idea of like future faking of like, hey, there's a cloud. Just kidding. No rain here. But you were hoping for a little bit. Swept along by the wind. It's just going along. It's just going wherever he wants. To give you the perception that he's growing, changing, developing, to give you the perception that he's getting better, to give you the perception that he's giving you all these promises wherever you want. Like, oh, I wish you would have said this. Oh, yeah, I said this. Oh, I wish you would have said this. Oh, yeah, I said this. Going wherever to future fake you into believing a reality that's not actually real. Fruitless trees in late autumn, twice dead, uprooted. Like, they're like hiding in like the trees. They're like hiding in with all the trees in the orchard, and you're like, that one's dead. Why is it still here? Well, it's still here because it hasn't been dealt with. It hasn't actually been taken up. It hasn't actually been like focused on or moved away. It's still here because there's still an issue, but it hasn't been taken care of. Sounds like the narcissist in your life in a lot of ways. We talk about wild waves of the sea, casting up the foam of their own shame. That to me is probably one of the most amazing verses that even talks about shame in the Bible, but like casting up their foam of their own shame. Like you see like the waves and it makes like this foam, it makes this white water that washes up and it's just like shame covers everything. The foam covers everything for a brief moment, and then it disappears. Like, narcissists have all this shame inside of them that they're casting their shame on everything, being like, I feel shame, abuse. I feel shame, blame. I feel shame, project. I feel shame, do anything I need to do to get away from you and the problem that's going on in my life in that moment. So narcissist feels the shame, and there's a reaction, there's a response that's abusive. Wandering stars, from whom the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved forever. Wandering stars. This oftentimes is interesting, going back to, like, in olden days, like being able to navigate where the stars are. And you're like, wait a second, that's my North Star. That's where I'm supposed to go. And then you're like, wait a second, it moved. Now it's over here. Now it's over here. Okay? Narcissists mislead you and misguide you all the time. Like, that's the focus of, like, how do I keep you moving and going different ways so you don't actually get clear, so you don't actually deal with the facts. Let's see. There's a couple other things. We'll just jump down here. These are grumblers, malcontents, following their own sinful desires. They're loudmouth boasters, showing favoritism to gain advantage. It's a ton more things just packed in here. I'm not going to be able to break it all down. What I need you to see is narcissism is not this new thing. It's not this newfangled thing that people are like, oh, now we have narcissism. No, we finally found a label for the problem that was already there already. An entitled, selfish asshole that is not willing to be honest, and as a result continues to lie, manipulate, cheat, steal, and abuse other people. That's been around since the beginning of time. So when we start to think that we're dealing with something new, we're not. There's nothing new under the sun. There might be different labels or way to be able to work through it and process it, but we're still dealing with the same old things. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy just to slap a I love Jesus sticker on it and make it all better. Because we also have to go through some of the trauma. We have to go through some of the stories. We have to go through some of the lies. Because if we don't eradicate the lies, there's not an opportunity for honesty to actually open up to let God actually work. If God can't work, then oftentimes you're going to see the same spiral out over and over and over again. Let me know what you think. This week was a little bit interesting because we had a little bit more context about narcissism in the Bible, different aspects like that. We've got one more that's coming, so it'd be interesting. I'm really actually interested to see this YouTube week if views are going to be down or views are going to be up, because it might be just controversial and people are like, I hate this guy or I'm leaving, or it could be like, hey, let's hear more. I don't know. But that's who I am, where I am, what's going on. I don't fall into the religious box of conformity, but I believe that everybody should have a personal connection with God. That's where I am. That's where I'm going. And stick around for more. Y'all have a blessed, wonderful day. All right, welcome back to the day. Today we're talking about angels, demons, some narcissism. We're going to be talking about a couple different things that might just be a little bit different or unusual to what you're used to seeing on this channel. Most of the time I'm normally out and about or doing something different. Today I didn't feel like it because right now it's raining outside. So we're back in the studio just talking through this piece of, on Sunday, angels and demons. The interesting thing is I find a lot of people that will run the course of saying that narcissists are demons. They'll normally come out of the woodwork and they'll be like, no, it's demons, it's the Jezebel spirit, it's all these kind of things, right? And at the crux of it, you can see a lot of demons that are inside the Bible. You know that there's demons inside the spiritual realm. But when it comes down to this person that you've interacted with, or things that are going on, or just blanket statements, right, that go across of all narcissists are demons, things like that, I don't believe it, and I don't think that it's actually true. I think there's a piece that many times people are thinking that they're that way because of how they show up or how they're acting or how they look, but in reality, I think a lot of times narcissists are not demons. They're just someone who is filled with themselves and selfish. Ultimately, like pride, kind of like running to the surface, but also this piece of avoidance, running away from different things. There's multiple aspects and angles we can take on that, but at the end of the day, I don't think a person needs to be a demon in order to be an abuser. Simply, they can just be an abusive asshole. That doesn't mean they're a demon. It just means that they're a jerk. It just means that they're abusive. And inside of this realm, a lot of times people don't really think about this and don't really pay much attention and time to it. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't think that angels or demons, that they don't exist. I do, and I believe very much in them. But inside of this, I don't think you can say the statement, all narcissists are demons, or the majority of narcissists have demons in them. I don't think that's true. You could say maybe some might be influenced, right? Some might be pushed in certain directions than others. But at the end of the day, I don't really think that it comes down to that. What I think it comes down to is narcissists that are filled with themselves, that are filled with pride, that are running away from themselves, that are falling into this piece of wanting to just be a part of the lie. So they don't have to actually embrace, then accept who they actually are and what's actually showing up. So that's a whole other piece inside of there. But when we move into the unseen, like the area that you don't actually see on a day-to-day basis, it's been interesting in reading a lot of different books and just expanding my knowledge and expanding my world and consciousness about angels, demons, all different types of things inside of this. It's been different books that I've been reading, different things I've been studying, and trying just to be able to build an awareness of what's actually going on. Do I think that sometimes there are like spiritual forces at play? Yes, 100%. I've seen different things in my life. I've experienced different things that make me believe in that. And I've also seen it in other people's lives as well. There's been many times that we've seen and experienced different things. In our old house, there was one thing that kept happening there, that my wife had a lot of anxiety and stress about the house itself. Not even the trauma that was going on, though that was part of it, but there was also this high level of anxiety about the house that she would oftentimes like pray over it and pray to be able to reduce the anxiety. As soon as we left that old house, it was like gone. There's just instantly just the location moving, and whatever was in that house or connected to that house was no longer a piece that was able to have any influence over her. So there's multiple aspects inside of this. But what I want you to consider is inside this talk of like angels and demons. Most of the time, people just discount the unseen. They don't really think anything of it. They're like, well, I can't see it, so it doesn't really matter. I think it's way more prevalent than what people realize. I think there's pieces inside of the world that is being used and abused and moved through inside the area of angels and demons. But I don't think it's all narcissists. So hopefully this makes sense, that we're trying to be able to draw like a little bit of a line through this to make sense of just what we're talking about. With the piece of angels, I do think that angels exist as well. I think that angels have a powerful presence in the world. But an interesting thing with angels and with demons, and from what I've been learning and understanding in my personal walk and journey, which might be different than yours, but that's okay because you're on this channel watching mine. I'm not on your channel watching yours. So when we're talking through this, the interesting thing is this aspect of us being created in the image and likeness of God. And it seems like if you kind of look through different pieces, it seems like that's part of what also frustrated different angels. Of like, hey, this is going to happen. These people that God's creating on this planet are going to be in his image, in his likeness, where the angels aren't. The angels aren't that way. They're different, right? And so there's also a piece of us being in charge of the earth, us being in charge of having dominion, right, over the earth and over the plants and the animals and the birds and the trees, all these things that the angels didn't have this charge over, or this peace over. They didn't have dominion over the world or the earth or anything like that, but they were kind of like sitting around to do his bidding or what he needed. I don't know. Or we're not diving into all that. But part of it is what I'm getting at is this aspect of us being just lower than God. Doesn't mean that we are God, and doesn't mean we're capable of God-like things, but it does mean that inside of that, angels aren't these people that have this massive power over us, not to like control or manipulate. Not like a piece of like saying this is what you will or will not do. Same thing with demons. Like they're not someone who's just going to come into your life and like force you to do something, because you also have to partner with a demonic force. You also have to partner with an angelic force. You also have to have this partnership that happens there, because otherwise like you can't just have something come in and just take over completely. There is a partnership. There is a lie. There is a vow. There's something that's actually like traded in one sense to make this actually happen, and to make there be a connection point that is going to control or manipulate something even more. So there's one thing that I'm seeing, and then I've just been noticing inside of like my research, my study of what I'm actually picking up and trying to figure out inside the area of narcissism and narcissistic abuse, and how this actually affects and interacts. So there's a lot of different pieces inside here. Growing up, the unseen, the spiritual realm was never something that was focused on, never something that was even really talked about. I knew that it was there because I grew up in Christianity, grew up in religion, grew up in like evangelical, like Baptist churches, Southern Baptist, all those different types of like genres in one sense. But inside of that, it was always something that was like discounted. Like, yeah, there's evil in the world, and yeah, there's demons and angels, but we're just gonna kind of ignore them. Then it was almost like we have we're just going to continue moving forward, almost like that piece didn't exist. And I'd see this so many times in different churches where it didn't seem like they really gave it any credence in one sense. And then I would see other people that would actually give it credence, and they'd actually pray. Like pray to have like a block put up if there's going to be anything trying to enter in that area or that space. So I saw people that would dealt with it in different ways. And I don't think the best way is just to be ignorant about it. I don't think the best way is just to ignore it. But I also don't think the best way is to be paranoid either. But being able to step forward with faith in everything that you do, being able to know, hey, if you're a child of God, you can move forward. You can use Jesus' name to be able to make sure that you are protected as you continue to grow and develop you, because there's going to be things that might come at you. Now, I don't think that the more you grow and develop, that the more things you're going to necessarily get, because it's not necessarily this like sliding scale of, oh, now you're more holy, so you're going to get more trials, more testings. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me of like, oh, you're better. Now this person's going to attack you. I don't think God works that way. I don't think we're on a sliding scale of how much worth you have to God, because I think we're all priceless to him. Because he's created us, he's designed us, he's enabled us to be here on this planet. And I don't think it's a piece of like, well, you're worth something, you're not worth something. I don't think it goes off this validation or evaluation of what a person is or how a person shows up. But as far as angels and the demonic, I do believe in it. I do believe that it's real and it's present and there is danger inside of it. I don't think there's as much danger inside of a person who knows God and believes in him and has their faith in him. I don't think there's as much danger, because you can't get possessed by one. You're not going to get taken over or overridden. It's a piece that then you actually have more power like for you to be able to deal with different things. I'll never forget, inside of one of the books I was reading, which is called Splunkna, is teaching this modality that Christians use to be able to partner with God inside of muscle testing to figure out how to be able to help heal old childhood traumas and different pieces that are blocking people. And one of the things it mentioned there was it had this like small statement, a small comment that was talking through someone where they're interacting with an atheist, and interacting with not an atheist, someone inside the demon world, like demonic. So like they like satanic rituals, like different things like that. And they were asking them different questions about, can you spot a Christian? Can you spot someone who actually knows God? And the answer was yes, I can. Can spot them like across the room. They almost like from on the spiritual level, in the spiritual sense, they almost have like this mantle like over them, like protecting them. But I'm not really worried about them because they don't know how to use it. So it's very interesting that like someone who's connected into the spiritual world could actually see, okay, this person's a Christian, but they have no clue the power that they actually have. They have no clue like the power that they're able to actually exemplify or use on a daily basis. And it's very true. Like even with you and me, wherever you are in your life right here, right now, you don't understand how much power you have to create, to grow, to develop yourself. Much less like what this looks like in a spiritual sense. That's a whole nother ballgame, whole nother aspect. So what are your thoughts in the aspect of angels and demons? I just kind of open up the conversation. So this isn't comprehensive. This isn't like research and data. Like this is just me just talking inside of what I do on Sundays, just talking through this piece of the unseen, talking through this aspect about angels, demons. I don't think all narcissists are demons. I don't think they need to be abusive. I don't think that's a criteria, right, that needs to happen. But inside of this, if what you see on here resonates, watch some more of my videos, because you're like, who is this guy? What's going on? Watch some more of my videos so you know who I am and what I'm about. My name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness of narcissistic abuse, to help people heal, help women actually heal from toxic relationships, to find their voice, to get to a place where they actually break free of the triggers, break free of the trauma bond. And I work with a select few men that are shown up as liars and cheaters and abusers that want to actually find truth and bring that first and foremost in their life. So if I can help anyone that's on here about this, then let me know. Go to rawmotivations.com. Would love to help you move forward inside of your healing. With this video today, you're like, I don't even know if I like this video. I don't even know what this is going on. Then leave a comment down below. Just let me know. Would love to be able to get some of your feedback and some of the new styles of videos and some of the new pieces and some of the new content that's coming out. So we actually know, get a feel for what resonates, what doesn't resonate with you inside of dealing with narcissistic abuse and hearing just part of my life. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see y'all next time. You've been told it's all your fault, and that makes you feel crazy. No one understands you, and that leaves you in a place of being alone. You've tried to break free multiple times, and that leaves you helpless because nothing you've done has actually worked. It hasn't actually got you free or liberated from this toxic relationship. So you feel crazy, alone, and hopeless. Guess what? That's a lie. Because all it is how you've been raised and conditioned inside of this abusive relationship over and over. And as a result, you've sacrificed your growth, you've sacrificed your worth, and you've been trapped inside of a toxic relationship. What if I showed you the path to freedom? A way for you to actually get free mentally and emotionally from the toxicity that's happening right here, right now. You deserve more. You deserve to be able to heal. And I want to help you with that.
If I can help you with that, go to rawmotivations.com/breakthrough, schedule a call there, and let's talk.
Have you ever wondered if praying would change a narcissist's behavior, or maybe even heal narcissism? Maybe there's a way that if you pray or if you connect with someone on a certain level, that narcissists will change. Maybe you've wondered, and maybe you've thought, that spiritual or religious practices have an impact on the narcissist, on their personality traits, of actually getting them help, getting them healed, working through this. I talk to people a lot of times, so they'll be asking questions, or they'll be thinking through, maybe if I show this person more love, maybe if I care about them, maybe if I show them the gospel, maybe if I show them and get them into church, maybe if I do these different things. And there's this thought process that goes through thinking, if I just do these certain things, this person might change. We're going to talk through that a little bit today and kind of break down a little bit some of my thoughts, my ideas of talking through this aspect of, is praying going to save a narcissist? If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness about narcissistic abuse. I'm the founder of Raw Motivations, the creator of the Narc app, and your guide in the 7-day challenge called Escape Toxicity to help get you free from narcissistic abuse, to understand about it, reactive abuse, the guilt, the shame, the fog that you're in, and how to actually be free of the trauma bond. We start to break that down for you in this first step. This aspect of religion and this aspect of prayer a lot of times comes up in so many different categories. One of the aspects that it comes up is that there's a lot of narcissists in churches, in Christianity, in religion as a whole, that oftentimes use Christianity to hide behind, to act a certain way, to appear a certain way, to put up a certain mask of conforming to that religious organization's beliefs, but behind closed doors, still being abusive. Well, in this regard, a lot of people get to the place of thinking, well, if I just pray for this person, if I just work on this, if I lead them to Christ, if I do these different things, it will change them. It will save them. It will help them not become as awful as what they are. While there's a piece of that, they need to understand that prayer a lot of times is really transformational. It can help people in so many different ways. Prayer is a part of my life on a daily basis. But it is something that is personal to you. It's personal to what's actually going on, what you're actually going through, what's happening in your life. Now, with praying, you can offer up a lot of different prayers to say, hey, I want to pray for this person. I want to change this person. And we know that God actually hears those prayers. Okay, so in the religious structure, organization, Christianity, we know that God hears prayers and acts upon those. Okay, the difference with some of this is that God is not a narcissist. So God is not someone that's up there just pulling all the strings of life and making people do the things that they don't want to do or that they do want to do. Because the reality, when people start to think that and start to believe that, they get to the place where they're believing that someone is just forcing other people to do things. That's not who God is. And we don't see that exemplified in anything, anywhere, that he's actually forcing people, but this aspect of free will. Now, when this aspect of free will comes in of like, oh, this person actually has a choice, or this person can choose to do the things that they're doing, it shifts it up a little bit. Because then you realize that whatever you're saying or doing to this person, or whatever you're praying to try to have this person get changed or fixed or developed, it doesn't just mean that God up above is going to snap his fingers and make them better. Now, it could mean that he hears that prayer, but it could mean that that prayer also needs to be something that he's like, no, I'm not doing anything about it. Because he's not going to force another person to change. He's not going to force another person to transform without that other person actually accepting it, without that other person being willing to actually do the work required. And this is where a lot of people think that they can start to change the narcissist. They can start to fix the narcissist, that they can play God and actually fix another person. When in reality, the only person you can truly transform and work on is yourself. Is growing yourself, is helping yourself actually move and develop and change. The problem is a lot of Christianity and a lot of the social circles and a lot of society has shifted the frame on this, making you think that you can change another person, or making you think that getting a person into a Christianity or religious organization will transform them or make them change. A lot of times people don't understand that there are many, many, many narcissists in church. There's many narcissists that say they believe in God. There's many narcissists that profess to be a Christian. The problem is you don't see a changed lifestyle. You don't see something that's actually different. So as long as you keep going through the motions of trying to show them more love and trying to pray for them and doing all these things, but you don't actually see the fruit of it, you don't actually see something changing, you don't actually see something developing, then what's actually going on there is whatever prayers that you're doing are not actually impacting the other person's ability to be willing to actually change. This piece is going to be like spicy for some people. Some people are going to hate this idea, some people are not. But at the end of the day, like, one of the things I want you to understand is God is not a narcissist. He's not going to force another person to change. Just like you cannot force another person to change either. You can have them fit into conformity, which is a lot of what Christianity does. A lot of religion does, is make you conform to a certain image. That's why a lot of Christians and a lot of social circles and a lot of churches are only producing more narcissists, because they're convincing society of this is how it's supposed to look. This is how you're supposed to act. This is what you're supposed to do. To look a certain way, to act a certain way, to be spiritual. Then all you see is people putting more rules and regulations on different people, saying, hey, you need to look like this, and then it's easy to build a mask. It's easy to look a certain way. That's what I did. I built a mask based on the image that everybody else wanted me to be, based on the image that everybody thought I should be, based on the image that I was supposed to step into. Saying, this is who I'm supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to show up and serve and be this person for the religious organization I was in. And that piece showed this incongruence in my life. Of like, this is who I'm pretending to be, but this is not who I actually am. This is the mask that I'm putting up for others to see, but it's not actually who I am. What I was doing is I was still hiding the stuff that was inside because I didn't want to own it. I didn't want to be honest with it. I didn't actually want to expose it. There's a lot of aspects in Christianity that it talks about exposing, but when you actually get into the church, there's no exposure actually happening. There's a bunch of sedation. There's a bunch of lies. There's a bunch of people that come together and pat each other on the back and smile and have a great time, and no one actually talking about real shit. Because they're too scared of what that would make them look like, because then they won't be conformed to a certain image, and they'll actually show up like there's stuff wrong with them. Welcome to life. There is. Everybody has stuff wrong with them. But the journey is growing and changing and developing. Now, whatever religious organization or Christianity that you align to, the thing I need you to understand is your journey with that is personal. Your journey with that is also not a weapon to be able to beat other people into submission or into conformity. Now, this whole aspect of prayer and praying for a narcissist, I'm not going to give you a cut and dried answer of like, oh yeah, you can save this person by praying for them. Because in reality, you have no effect on it. You cannot actually save this person. It has to do with their willingness to actually open up and be honest with themselves. Open up and be honest with the truth. The hard thing is you're sold this idea of hoping that they're going to change. And oftentimes hoping that they're going to change based on what they've shown to you. That they keep saying they're going to change. They keep saying they're going to develop. They keep saying they're going to work on these things, but it's not actually happening. So I'm just trying to paint a picture of you understanding that, hey, you can pray for this person, but it also doesn't negate your responsibility to actually take care of yourself. This is not me saying you need to be selfish about this, or you need to be closed off from your emotions, or you need to have no empathy. I'm saying, no, you need to be able to look at this and evaluate things by what is actually there. If we want to talk in Christianity or religious terms, you need to be able to examine what is in your life by the fruit, by the result of what's actually happening there. So when you're in your relationship and you're praying for this person to change and they're not changing, you need to go to it and be like, hey, I am not seeing the fruit. I am not seeing the result of this prayer, and I'm not seeing a result of this relationship actually moving forward in a healthy way. Then you need to make a decision. Is this actually bringing me closer to the version of me that I want to develop? Is this bringing me closer to God? Is this bringing me closer to who I actually want to be? Is this actually helping me grow, change, heal, and develop? Or is it only pulling me farther down? You're like, well, we're supposed to give another person another chance. Yeah? You've given another chance. A ton of chances. The thing is, you keep holding out that something's going to change when this other person has shown no remorse, no care, no change over years. How long will you keep doing that? And so you start cutting out people that are actually toxic in your life, that you're cutting out people that are actually abusive in your life, that you're pulling away from maybe friends or family, you're pulling away from spouse or whoever it might be, saying, hey, I'm no longer willing to tolerate the stuff that's actually happening here, but I want to actually grow myself. You cannot grow yourself while you're constantly getting dragged down. It doesn't work that way. So the more you try to be able to transform another person and change another person, you have to understand this is not your job. This is not the power you have over another person. What you can use the prayer for is to help transform your life and to be able to pray for other people. But at the end of the day, you have to evaluate where you're actually at and what is actually happening. If you're at a place where the person is not showing up honest, vulnerable, and showing consistent change, you still do not have a relationship. There is nothing there. So you need to be able to understand this step moving forward of like, maybe this will happen, maybe this will happen. Oftentimes will get you into this hope cycle that won't actually bring you to fruition because it will blind you to the actual results in front of you. How is this person showing up in a daily aspect? The thing is, you can get a lot of narcissists in the church and they'll be great because there'll be a lot of other narcissists there they can hang out with. But at the end of the day, how are they actually demonstrating their love for you? For God, for others? How are they actually showing up on a daily basis that is true and honest and vulnerable? How are they actually growing and changing themselves? You can't force another person to change. You can't manipulate another person to change. You can't pray another person to change because that still is not in your power to force change on anyone at all. And any change you do force won't be long lasting. Might be a little controversial, but it is what it is. If you like what you see here, if you want to hear more about this topic or just more in general talking about narcissism, like and subscribe, rate, review. Let us know like what you thought of this episode and share it with someone else to try to help bring awareness of what's actually going on there. Toxic Christianity and narcissism in the church is rampant, just like it is in the rest of the world. It's not just limited to that at all. But it is something that everybody needs to know about and needs to be talked about because most churches won't. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Now, I grew up in a very Christian environment. Grew up in the church, grew up where my dad was a pastor, an evangelist, a missionary, checked all the different boxes. And with religion and Christianity and a lot of different fundamental, like Bible believing, like Baptist, Southern Baptist, like all different conservative type of areas, came a lot of judgment when it came to the topic of divorce. Now, it wasn't always proclaimed and put out there of like, hey, we're going to judge you if you get a divorce, but there was this underlying feeling, impression, and almost like kind of like a condescending, like looking down your nose at another person if they were that person that got a divorce. Have you seen this? Many times people will find this inside of relationships with a toxic person where they go to the church and they try to be able to talk through it, or they try to be able to separate, and the church even holds them hostage, being like, you're going to get in trouble if you divorce. It's not right. You're not able to do this. It's not God's plan for your life. And it leaves the person stuck even longer in a toxic relationship. This is why many times I will recommend people not to go to counseling with a Christian counselor as a couple. Mainly just because when you're dealing with a toxic, narcissistic, abusive person, it becomes very, very difficult for some counselors to be able to see this and understand this. The majority of Christian counselors are trying to be able to rebuild and put the marriage back together. Makes sense, right? But the problem is when you're in a toxic relationship, he has one agenda. That's how he looks. His image, his face, his idea, his thought, his impression of other people is the most important thing. So even if he has to look like he's the best person in the world, if he has to look like a great Christian that shows up in the religious structure over and over to check all the boxes, he'll still come back and abuse you over and over. And then everybody's like, what's your problem? Why would you even want to leave him? With that comes different levels of judgment on divorce. And that's what we're kind of talking about today and just sharing some of my perspective and my piece inside of here as we dive in on a Sunday. Sunday is typically going to have a little bit more of a spiritual frame and focus right now as we're testing and doing a couple things of just how I'm sharing part of my life and the things that are going on. So if you're like, hey, I don't really like the spiritual stuff, well, you can come back on Monday and we'll be back in the regular narcissistic content just like normal. But until we do, if you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness about narcissistic abuse. My goal is to help you break free from the toxicity that currently has you trapped, stuck, and feeling alone and lost right here in the moment. I help people break the trauma bond, the addiction to a toxic person, and to find their freedom inside of who they are and who they're actually called and meant to be. Well, when we talk through this piece of divorce has been brought up in my life multiple times with my wife and myself. Multiple times where there's triggering moments, there's aspects where like it all of a sudden flared up and we're just like, that's it, we're done getting a divorce. It came from her side, it came from my side. It came early on in the marriage, it came later on in the marriage. It came in a lot of different areas. The thing I want you to understand is early on, I focus and I fit in such the religious frame where I wanted to make sure she knew divorce was never on the table. Now, that didn't account for my actions. It didn't account for how I showed up. All it showed up was I wanted to make sure the divorce wasn't on the table because I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the guy that got divorced when my parents had it all together. Like, why should our marriage fall apart? Like, no, it can't be my fault. It has to be her fault. It has to be something that she has to fix. I had to figure out how to blame everybody and everything else except for looking at myself. I didn't want to look at myself. I didn't want to deal with the guilt, the shame, the blame, all the different things that were triggering inside of my heart I didn't want to deal with. So early on, we made kind of like a pact, an idea of like, hey, divorce is never going to be an option, a piece that we don't even want to entertain. But that was also because there's been so many things pressed upon us from other relationships. My wife had different relationships that she'd seen growing up. She's like, I don't want to be like them, so I want to stay in a relationship. I don't want to have a divorce. I don't want to be the next person inside of a line of other people who've done this. I don't want to be that person. And I'm looking at it from the frame of growing up in Christianity and religion of like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to look bad. I don't want to be the guy that's like shunned. I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh yeah, you're the one who did that. Like, I didn't want that. So there's always this like preconceived ideas and stuff coming into the relationship saying, we're not going to get divorced. It's never going to be on the table. Now, the problem with that is early on, making that kind of declarative statement is great and it's positive in a committed relationship. But whenever I started moving to the place where I was no longer committed, no longer invested, no longer engaging, no longer caring about her emotions, her feelings, and not just on the emotional side, but then started cheating, started doing the things that I wanted to do just to fulfill my carnal desires. I don't have the validation and the attention that I would get from her. Well, I'm going to go find that from someone else. I'm going to go be with someone else so I can feel better about myself. All of that doesn't make up a marriage, doesn't make up connection, doesn't make up the reality of what a marriage is actually supposed to be. And I was the forefront, the leader of that, being the one that was breaking and disintegrating all of the marriage, all of the bonds, all of the ties that we'd actually put together and said in saying our vows. Instead, I was the one that was throwing those away every single day about how I was showing up. So this piece of divorce came up, but it wasn't something that was even viable, right? Like it was like, well, we should do this. But it wasn't something we both even wanted to do because we didn't like the idea. Even when it got to the place where my wife left me, it wasn't that she left and she was like, okay, we're getting divorced. She was like, I have to get out. I have to leave. Then she's just going to figure it out from there. Deep down inside, did she know that she was going to get divorced? Yeah, that was the path. But at that moment, she was like, I just need to separate. I just need to get out. Now, there's been multiple times that we've both brought it up. Well, I've been triggered, I've been frustrated. Like, you should just go off and be with someone who can actually love you, right? Playing victim. You'll hear your narcissist say stuff like that. You should go off and be with someone else who can give you the love that I can't, right? And it's not because he can't give you that love. It's because he's unwilling to give you that love. He's unwilling to actually change. So he's like, I don't really feel like changing, so why don't you go find someone who can actually love you? Because I don't really want to. Do you see how selfish and self-centered that actual statement is? But when the narcissist says it, it's like, oh, look at me. I'm being so loving, letting you go and letting you find someone who actually will love you. No, it just means he's an abusive asshole that doesn't actually give a shit about you. So you need to wake up to the reality that when this is happening, it's just a manipulative way where he can play the victim in the situation and be like, I'm giving you up. I'm letting you go. No, I would do the same thing. Okay. So different things that would be triggered. Divorce was something that came up multiple times, but there's always this judgment, this like weight on our shoulders of like, what are our parents going to say? Oh, like how are my parents going to respond to this? How are they going to react? How do I save face? This is why I wanted to be able to save face by having her divorce me. Like this is the whole victim mentality just spread out even longer. Like I was like, how can this work? Well, I can't divorce her because I'm going to look bad. But if she left me or if she cheated on me, then great, I'd have a way out.
there was always this thought, these different ideas that would go through my head, like these horrible, awful ideas of trying to figure out, okay, how do I get out of this relationship without looking bad? How do I get out of this relationship with the least amount of damage? How do I get out of this relationship without it being my fault? I never wanted to admit that there was any fault of my own. I never wanted to admit that I had any reason or any aspect of why the relationship was falling apart. I just wanted to get away from it. I wanted to figure out, how can I do what I want to do without having this person over me, without having this person linked to me, without having this person like weighing me down, dragging me back. All of these things were trying to push her away so I could actually be free and be the person I wanted to be. Not realizing that the person I wanted to be was still enslaved to my own lies, all of my own bullshit that I was putting on top of myself that I wasn't able to see clearly. There's always this judgment. Now, this piece of divorce has come up, like I said, multiple times. It's come up at the beginning of the relationship. It's come up like more recently. Simply because there's times where we'll get so triggered and so frustrated that we're dealing with so many things that it's like, well, this might be the only option. The difference now is learning how to be able to work through those conversations, learning how to work through triggers so that we're not just firing off and getting upset at each other, but we're able to actually express the needs. Inside of couples counseling that we do now, it's been huge to be able to have different moments where the counselor's been able to sit down and kind of walk us through. Well, is this what you meant to say because this is what you said? Or this is how you meant to say it? Well, I think what you're saying is this. And all of a sudden, it's almost like we have a translator. A translator to be able to say, okay, I said this aggressively and frustrated, but I didn't actually mean this. It was another wound, another piece inside of me that I didn't know how to be able to express. And so us being able to work through that has been massive, massive in our relationship. Could we have done that years ago? No, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't willing to actually see it or acknowledge it or respond to anything that she was saying. Like being able to actually listen and hear her, I had deaf ears. Wasn't willing to hear anybody else except my own person, my own ego, and everything that I wanted to do. When you're in a toxic relationship and you're involved inside of religious structure, you're oftentimes going to have a lot of judgment on you. But you have to keep in mind that the majority of times this judgment is coming from people who have never been in a toxic relationship. They've grown up oftentimes in a plastic feeling church or religious structure that makes everybody feel like everything's okay. But while they go to church and have everything feel okay, there's a plastic to it of, hey, everybody's doing great. When in reality, they're not actually admitting the shit that's in their own lives. They're not actually seeing the relationships that are walking through the church door that just got out of abuse at home. They're not seeing the toxicity that's actually happening because when people come into oftentimes a religious place, they put on a face, the facade, whether you're narcissistic or not. People want to show up happy and joyful and great, but oftentimes they're not willing to reveal the shit that's inside. When you're dealing with a toxic relationship, be careful because you can get to the place where you start making decisions based on other people, on judgment, on expectations, and on the weight of other people's thoughts and feelings and emotions on you versus you actually evaluating and seeing, this is what's happening. This is what's affecting me. This is actually breaking down me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I'm actually falling apart because of the toxicity that I'm in. If you were sick and you went to church and you're like, I'm sick because of this, they might say, okay, well, you should go to the doctor so you can get that fixed. But when it's your relationship, they're just like, well, you should pray better and you should guys love each other. There's got to be a different fix, and there's got to be a wake-up call that happens to a lot of Christians and religious structures that force people to try to stay together when in reality it's extremely abusive and it's breaking someone down mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. If you're trapped in one of these relationships and you feel this weight and you've been cheated on, you've been abused, you've been lied to, you've been gaslit, and you're confused, I want to invite you to an opportunity to actually get clear. Because if you can have clarity about what's happening in your relationship, it gives you a path forward to be able to see the next step. I hope you take the opportunity to look and to invest into you. If you reach out, go to rawmotivations.com/breakthrough to be able to learn a little bit more about what I do and be able to see the next steps moving forward in your healing today.
Hey, welcome today. If you guys are new, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness about narcissistic abuse. I work with women that are trapped in toxic relationships to help them find freedom from narcissistic abusive assholes. And I also work with narcissistic men who've shown up as liars or cheaters or abusers that actually want to have something different in their life and have different results. And I work with a few of those. There's not too many men that reach out, so the majority of people I work with, the majority of the programs that we have built are for women who are dealing with narcissistic abuse. If that's you and you're curious about what I do, then go to realmotivations.com. Today what we're going to be talking about is a piece about divorce. And specifically we're going to put, a lot of our Sunday ones are going to be more in the religious frame. So if you don't like the religious piece or the Christian piece or the God piece, then you can skip and you can just come back on Monday and we'll be back to regular narcissistic content. But inside of this, we're talking about narcissism and divorce, but then also layering on top the whole aspect of divorce and the whole aspect of the religious pressure, the religious pieces inside of there of what you can or can't do. And honestly, what you have to boil it down to divorce is this a sin? What does it actually mean? What does it actually look like when we're dealing with toxic, abusive people? And when you're in the place of wanting to get a divorce, is it a sin? What does it actually look like? And I want you to leave your opinion down below because your opinion matters. And I'm curious, what does it actually mean to you? Is it a sin if a person divorces? Yes or no? What does this actually look like? So when we're diving into the piece of narcissistic abuse in Christianity, in churches, in religion, all of these different aspects here, what we run into a lot of times is churches that are very much keeping people in toxic relationships. And what I mean by this is you'll see people that go to counseling and see people that go to Christian therapy, nouthetic counseling, all this kind of stuff, where oftentimes the strain of it is wanting to keep the marriage together, which makes sense. We're not saying that it's a bad thing to keep the marriage together. But the problem is when you have two people that are coming together that say they want the marriage to be together, but the one person is lying to the therapist, to the counselor, and actually doesn't want the marriage together and is doing a lot of things that are abusive to the person mentally, emotionally, even physically. The hard part and where I draw a really, really hard line is when the church, when the religion, when Christian people are telling people to pray and stay in the relationship when they're actively getting abused. I think that is enabling abuse, and I think that's abusive in of itself. So if you're in a place where that's going on, I just think that's completely wrong, and it doesn't really match up to anything biblical that you see where it says, hey, stay in the abuse and continue to get abused. It just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't even match up from like a biblical standpoint. But oftentimes we will see this where the people want to continue to have you reconcile. And oftentimes this is because the narcissist has painted such a good picture of himself and such an awful picture of you, gaslighting and making other people believe that you're the crazy or you're the insane one. When it comes to the end of the day, what he's actually trying to do is just manipulate the whole situation so he can appear better than you. When in reality, he's not, but he's trying to look like he's the good guy and that you're the bad guy, that you're the crazy one. And you'll see this oftentimes in kind of counseling, which is why I do not recommend that you go to couples counseling with a narcissist, and definitely do not recommend you go to couples counseling with a narcissist in a Christian context, like going to a Christian counselor, because most of them are very unable to be able to see about narcissism, and they don't really even view it as being real. Narcissism wasn't really viewed as being real growing up. My parents didn't really think of that. I didn't think of that. It wasn't even a thing, right? It wasn't a thing that we talked about, that brought up, or that was even about. But a lot of the pieces of like psychological stuff, that was piece that inside of the church and the system that I grew up in, it really was like, yeah, that's not really real. It's not really that big of a deal. Like, just trust God more, you'll figure it out, that kind of a thing. But there wasn't a piece of actual help and support inside of, oh, you might actually have something wrong that we need to help you work through. That wasn't a thing. We're getting way off track, so we need to dial it back in. When we're dealing with this piece of narcissism in divorce, then you have the Christian layer on top being, hey, divorce is a sin. Now, we need to really, I want to paint a full picture of this, and it's hard to do in one video, so we're probably not going to be able to do it in one video. But I want you to think of this. The church and Christianity oftentimes view sin as being on a sliding scale. And the sliding scale only matters when it becomes public. So pornography is a bad thing inside of the church and is a sin in most people's eyes. And that is only seems to be a really bad thing when it is public. But when it's private, it's kind of like one of those acceptable sins. Versus like cheating, that's more of a public sin. So it's more of like, oh, taboo. You don't believe me? Like, this is what we see inside of a lot of Christian churches, a lot of Christianity. Pornography is just kind of like the norm, and most people don't even want to acknowledge that it's there when 50% or more of people in churches, of guys in churches, are in pornography. but we don't talk about it because it ends up being something we just gloss over and move past. So when we talk about this piece of sin, we also have to start dialing in what is sin. Okay, if you're in the place where you believe, hey, it's a sin to divorce, then you also have to be in the place it's a sin to lie. But that's happening this entire relationship that you're in. You also have to believe that it's a sin to, gossip about other people, but that's happening inside of the church and inside of the religious organization all the time as well, without people actually owning up to the truth, owning up what's actually going on, and working through it. A lot of churches are filled with a lot of fake plastic people. And inside of that, the fake plastic people that show up and that say everything is fine and good, they don't actually talk about the shit that's inside, because that's not acceptable inside of the church. So divorce looks really bad inside of church and Christian places. Why? Because it's a public manifestation that something is wrong, versus being able to put on a mask and come to church and say everything's great after you just were in a screaming match with your spouse in the car, after you were just abusive at home, and then you walk in and then everything looks right. That's how a lot of narcissists will be. They'll act a certain way, they'll pee a certain way, they'll show up a certain way, they'll have this mask that's a certain way that shows that they're great, but then behind the scenes, they're awful. So that's the piece you need to understand inside of the church, inside of like religion. A lot of times this is what we'll see. So then coming back to abusive divorce, is it a sin? So you see in the Bible, you see that God's intention was for one man, one woman married for life, okay? Whatever you think about that, doesn't really matter. That's what I think, and that's also what it says. So when we see this, then there's the piece of like, okay, but what happens when that doesn't work out? What happens when the breakup happens? What happens when there's a divorce? What happens when someone dies, right? And so there's different contexts and pieces in the Bible where it addresses if someone dies, you can move on, all this kind of stuff. But one thing that is not really talked about a whole lot is inside the Old Testament of where they actually said, hey, Moses was given... Moses or Abraham, I'm going to botch it, but they were given a provision to divorce out of the hardness of their hearts, right? It talks in Matthew, it says, hey, you're not supposed to divorce, and they're like, hey, teacher, we heard you're not supposed to divorce. What about this? Why was there divorce allowed back then? And he was like, out of your hardness of your hearts, that it was something that he made a provision for. And you're like, what? How does this make sense? Like, we can't do it, but they did. Like, how does this make sense? So it makes sense that they had this confusion and this frustration of like, wait a second, they were trying to catch him in a lie, right? But this whole piece of like, why is this actually going on? So the whole goal is marriage for life. Two people together, growing, developing who they actually are, moving forward. But then there's this other piece that inside of Old Testament, there is also this aspect that in ancient biblical times, there was a provision of the hardness of their hearts, because what was happening was the guys there were being abusive. Now let's explain. They're being abusive in the way of, hey, how they were showing up was being with one person and then deciding they did not want that person anymore and putting that person away. Now in biblical times, it was putting that person away but not giving a certificate of divorce. So there's not like an official piece. So in biblical times, not saying it's right, but I'm saying in biblical times, what it would look like is if that person went away and they pushed that person away and they separated, but they didn't get officially divorced, and that woman went to another marriage or something like that, then she would be an awful person, right? Not saying that she's an awful person, that's just saying the perception back then. So inside of this, you'd have guys that would be with a gal, they would be like, let's say married, like let's put it in modern day terms. They would be married and they'd be separated, but they wouldn't let her have divorce. So then she wouldn't be able to have the benefits of being fully divorced. She would still be tied to this person, and he'd go be with someone else. So at that point, it's like, hey, because you're actually being abusive in nature and what's happening, we need to be able to provide a place of divorce so you're not screwing all these women over. That was kind of the piece and the gist behind it. But it's really interesting because most people don't even look at that. All they look at, well, divorce is bad. And the frustrating thing about it is they put divorce on such a higher tier of sin than what they even look at in their own lives. And so it's a piece that I really have you consider if you're struggling with this question of like divorce is a sin. One, you're thinking that God can't forgive you. Not that you're walking into this willfully being like, let me sin so he can forgive. That's not the point, and that's not what I'm saying. And then two, you're also looking at being like, oh, well, this sin is worse than this other sin. And it's not. I love there's like a chart or a thing that I saw where it looked like a graph, right? It looked like a graph, and there was all these lines of like, this sin, this sin, this sin. It was like a graph going higher and higher. And it was like how we view sin. And then you almost like zoom out and you look from the top down, and all you could see is like the tops of the graph. And so they all looked exactly the same. And it was like how God's view sin. And I love that image and that view of it, because so many times we put it on a sliding scale. We put it on a sliding scale of what is sin and what is not. And even though we're not saying, oh, that's not sin, we're treating it that way. Because when a person stretches the truth, when the person lies about who they are, when the person's not authentic to the shit that's actually going on inside, when there's all these different pieces that are inside that are actually showing up as, if we view it in the same exact way, as sin, but the person doesn't care, they're not really viewing it as sin. But divorce, sin, right? So we need to really make sure that, one, if you want to play the game of divorce is sin and you want to go down that route, then you also have to view all of it the same way. You can't pick and choose. It's not a place where you can be like, well, I think that sin's okay and that sin's not okay. No, that's just you making up your own scripture and you deciding that you're God and not really moving forward with what it actually says. If you want to believe in sin and you want to go that route and you want to say this is what divorce is sin, then you also have to say, okay, here's the other things in my life that are just as bad. That's the problem, is people don't view it being just as bad. If you want to say divorce is sin, then also the lie that you just told to your spouse is the same exact depth and breadth and weight of the same exact sin. But that gets discounted. Why does divorce get put in a whole different place? You're like, well, God wants marriage to be together. Yeah, he also wants people to be honest. And you don't even be honest with yourself. Like, you don't even be honest to your partner because you're afraid because he's abusive. You don't even be honest to yourself because you're inauthentic in how you show up, because you don't even show up as who you are because you can't, because of him. So there's so many different levels to this and so many different layers, and I know this video probably does not do justice to them at all because we haven't had enough time, and I haven't had my Bible out here flipping through to be able to say, look at this verse. I'm not talking about that. But inside of here, let me know your opinion. Let me know your thoughts, just how I broke it down today. If it resonates, let me know. If you think I'm an idiot, let me know. Like, we're just trying to be able to paint a different perspective on what people are struggling with right here, right now, in dealing with a toxic, narcissistic, abusive asshole, and they're trying to figure out, how do I actually process the fact that if I do this, I'm going to hell, or if I do this, then I'm a sinner. Well, you're a sinner already. That's what the Bible says. So anyways, whole other side topic that we're not going to dive into. But this is Sunday, and Sunday we just dive into different aspects about God, Christianity, and evidently sin. So that was the piece for today. Hope you all had a good time watching or a bad time watching. Let me know. Otherwise, like, rate, or review. Share this with someone that might be struggling with this too, and leave your comments and opinion down below. So we'll see y'all next time.
Do you believe that you're not allowed to get a divorce? Maybe this falls under your religious structure, your just religious beliefs, Christianity as a whole, the church that you go to, the family that you came up from. But there might be this piece that you believe, or that you think, or that has been told or placed upon you, just the simple fact you're not allowed to get divorced. Maybe you went through the whole process of getting married and having this place of sitting down and having your vows, to death do us part, right? The piece that says you're going to be locked into this relationship forever. You're going to be committed to that person forever. But what happens when the other person inside of the relationship is not committed to that, is not willing to actually adhere to those vows, to that commitment, to that truth that they said, hey, I'm willing to be this way if you're willing to be this way, and then they decide, see ya, no longer care. This is what happens when you're in a narcissistic relationship. You see that this person that you fell in love with is no longer the person that you fell in love with. The version that you saw, the person you thought was originally there, no longer seems to exist. In fact, it seems to be completely opposite. The guy that you once showed up as loving and kind and respectful and honest with you has completely flipped and is now a liar, a cheater, an abusive asshole that no longer is willing to provide space or time for you, but instead is focusing on what he wants, what he desires, and anything that you bring up is an inconvenience to him. Now, when we bring it into the place of Christianity, religion, this is where it gets dicey. It gets dicey because so many people have believed for such a long period of time and are very adamant about the fact that you can never divorce. It's not possible. You're not allowed. This is in multiple different religions, not just Christianity, but that's typically what I'm going to reference because that's my background as well. So oftentimes we see Christianity that perpetuates abuse inside of relationships simply because they lock the door and say you're not allowed to actually leave. Have you seen this? I've talked with many people that have been inside religious structures that have not been allowed to leave their relationship, or have been counseled, or have been kicked out of the church because of the simple fact that they were going to get a divorce from a person who is abusive and hurting them. Now, you'd think that it would make sense when we're talking about someone who's physically abusive, right? But even then, a lot of times you'll have religious structures that say you're not allowed to leave, okay?
So this is a piece that is very prevalent in a lot of religion and a lot of Christianity out there. Okay. What happens is people get stuck in the relationship even longer because not just the fact that maybe the religious people say you can't do it, but then they feel this huge piece of shame and guilt. And what happens is you start to feel a giant level of shame and guilt that you're letting down your religion, you're letting down your culture, you're letting down your family. And as a result, you don't go through with getting a divorce. And it keeps you in this relationship longer. It continues to add this brain fog and confusion to your life. And it continues to leave you in a place where you don't actually make a move, but you stay stuck. Then you start resorting to just hoping that something's going to change, just praying constantly, thinking if you just pray about it, it will eventually fix him. Maybe God will come down and change his heart or manipulate him to think something different than what he's currently thinking. Now, this isn't saying, hey, that the Holy Spirit and God doesn't work to convict, but at the same time, he also gives people free will. This is the part that sometimes gets lost inside of this whole conversation. Is you'll see people that say, hey, God gave free will, but then we don't actually take a look at being yeah, that means the toxic guy in your life has the free will and has the choice to be able to choose to abuse you or not to abuse you. He has the choice to cheat on you or not cheat on you, and you don't actually affect that. You don't affect his decisions. You don't affect his choice. In fact, if we looked at it, you probably haven't affected much of him in the entirety of the relationship because he doesn't value, respect, appreciate, or have any space for your opinions, your beliefs, your thoughts, or your feelings. Do you see this? Does this resonate with you so far? If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness about narcissistic abuse and help provide transformation. Breaking women free from toxic relationships, from the trauma bond, from the addiction, from the triggers, helping them know who they are, establish healthy boundaries, and start to transform to the person they're actually trying to be. I work with women that have been abused, helping provide closure and clarity from the toxic relationship that they got out of, from a person who was just like me. How I interacted, how I responded, and being able to provide answers so that they can actually move forward. I also work with a select few guys that have reached out saying, hey, I feel like I'm narcissistic. I identify with stuff that you say. Can you show me how to be able to work through it? And I talk with them as well. If you're interested in any of that, you can go to rawmotivations.com. Would love to be able to help either one of you to help you move forward. I work with women that have been abused, and I work with men that have been narcissistic assholes. I don't work with men that have been abused and female narcissists. It just doesn't work. Not my avatar, not the person I connect or can help, but there's other resources out there that can. Anyways, that's kind of where we are with that. So when we talk about this piece of getting a divorce and we bring it into the realm of Christianity and religion, there's all this guilt and shame that you're not allowed, you're not able to, etc. And so one of the passages that people will come up with or people will see would be, what about when they ask Jesus, be like, wait a second, you let them have divorce in the Old Testament. So what about now? Can we have divorce now? And it goes back to this passage, Matthew 19:8, and where Jesus said, because of the hardness of your heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. Meaning, hey, the initial intent was not that you get divorced. Okay, that was the initial intent. But because there was these guys in the Old Testament that had hardened hearts, that were assholes, right? That these guys were not actually living according to a purpose and direction that was anything remotely close to what God wanted them. He's like, hey, Moses gave an exception. I gave through Moses an exception saying, hey, it's okay if we go ahead and divorce because we need to, because your heart is so hard. Now, we see a lot of times inside the Bible where hardness of the heart has been shown. You see that with Pharaoh, right? Let my people go. Like the children of Israel trying to leave Egypt. He would be like, yeah, you can leave, then harden his heart. Yeah, you can leave, then harden his heart. So we see different pieces where hardening of the heart is there. But what we're talking about inside of older biblical times is a hardening of the heart, not letting people be free. Kind of like Pharaoh too. But what we're talking about is inside relationships. So when we're looking at the relationship, it says, hey, Moses actually gave you this. Moses granted you this permission to be able to divorce. Why? What was actually going on inside of Old Testament and what was going on here? Okay, what was happening is inside Old Testament, if a person separated, or if a person was like, hey, I don't want you anymore, or hey, we're going to get a divorce, but hadn't actually given divorce papers, that other person was legally bound to the first person. Okay, so let's say Narcissist in the Old Testament was like, hey, wife, no longer want you anymore. I want this person. So I'm going to go over to this person, but I'm not going to give you divorce papers. that culture, that woman was legally bound still to him. So if she went to someone else, screwed up, but if she went to someone else, then they'd be like, oh, you're a cheater and we'll stone you and throw you out. Okay. So what was happening is like she was trapped. She was trapped inside the relationship because he wasn't willing to actually give her a divorce. He's like, let me have my cake and eat it too. This has been going on from the eons of time. It's not just like narcissism popped up the other day and we're like, oh, this is brand new. No, it's been here. We just haven't had a label for it. So what you'd have is like, hey, he's leaving this woman trapped in the relationship. She can't go out and take care of herself, her family, or anyone else simply because she's still trapped inside this, legally bound. But he's not giving her a divorce, and he doesn't care to give her a divorce, doesn't care about her, doesn't care to give her a divorce, and doesn't care to do anything that actually helps and supports her. In fact, he's already moved on to the next person. Does this sound like narcissism at all? Like, want to be able to paint a picture. This oftentimes happens in your own life. He doesn't care about you, doesn't let you leave, goes and cheats. Very simple. Okay, so the provision that was made here was this aspect of Moses being able to say, hey, out of the hardness of your hearts, you being an asshole, you need to actually divorce this woman so she can actually go out and be free. Not much more to be said. What I'm trying to get you to understand is a lot of times religion wants to keep you in conformity, wants to keep you in a place that says you have to fit the mold, fit the box, and look the way, play the part. And when you do this, you can't get divorced because that will look bad on the church, that will look bad on Christianity, that will look bad on your family, that will look bad on your parents. And everybody brings in all of their stupid egos versus actually saying, wait a second, if we take a look at this, this guy is mentally, emotionally, physically, and sexually abusing this woman, and we're saying still be in the relationship. How does that even make sense? Because when you put this under the grounds of Christianity and religion, and we start to strip away all of the laws and regulations and conformity, we start looking at a connection with God. God is not the God of abuse. He's the God of love, which means, hey, he doesn't want you to be in a relationship that's consistently abusing and pushing you down, but you to actually be free. And he's provided that, and he provided that inside the Bible for people who had hardness of their hearts. Narcissistic assholes that were not willing to actually release the woman that they no longer cared about or that they never cared about, but they just had her trapped for image purposes. And so when you think of this, I want you to understand there's going to be people that are going to project onto you. You can't do that because think of what it would do to our family name. Screw the family name because you've brought this projection and an ego into the picture that you feel like your family name is more important than your kids' safety. Screw you and your entitled ego. Like, understand that, like, this piece of you being stuck in abuse, so many people aren't going to want to acknowledge that you're in it. Because if they acknowledge it, then they have to actually step into the shit. And they don't want to do that. This is why a lot of Christianity is plastic. It's like made of this face of like, I want to look and appear a certain way. Masks that come into Christianity, very narcissistic. And a lot of narcissists that are in Christianity because they want to look and appear a certain way, but actually digging down deep under what's actually going on inside, can't do that. Hey, we're all fine. We're great. As they roll up into the church after just been screaming at their wife. As they get up another day and preach another sermon after they're just watching pornography the day before. This all happens inside of so many Christian circles. Out of the hardness of their hearts, there is a provision made. Moses allowed them to divorce their wives because the hardness of their hearts was like, let's not keep abusing, manipulating, and controlling these women. Let's actually let them be free because you're not willing to actually step up as a man and lead them and actually be a man to be able to help them grow, develop, and be the woman that they're called to be. Instead, you're keeping them held hostage and you're going out and being with other women. There's our wrap up for narcissism in the Bible for this week. Let me know what you thought. You might have enjoyed it. You might have hated it. And I'm sure there'll be a couple people that want to spar back and forth of what you're thinking. But that's my opinion. And that's where I believe is there. Based on who God is and based on the Bible and based on the scriptures that are talking through this piece of the hardness of the heart of why. There's sometimes provisions made, not exempting God's plan. Because he says the initial design from the beginning, it was not so. The initial design was one man, one woman to be married forever. But
we as humans have a way of screwing that up pretty bad. And then when you bring in abuse, it's not a place where you should be in a relationship forever. You have an opportunity to be able to grow, change, heal, and develop yourself. The question is, will you do it, or will you stay trapped inside the toxic relationship that's currently destroying your life right here, right now? Y'all have a blessed, wonderful day. If I can help at all, go to rawmotivations.com. Would love to help you move forward in the healing process today.